This homepage had a familiar pattern I see across a lot of SaaS teams. The product is super strong, but the story hasn't quite caught up to where the product has evolved to. There's nothing wrong per se, but the real differentiators and real value props weren't as front and center as they could be. And in this particular founder's case, what makes their offer interesting is the angle most people miss: real social signal data without risking anyone's account or getting banned or shadow banned. And once we talked through that, a couple of spots became clear where that strength could carry way more weight in their narrative. We'll take a calm walkthrough through the page, highlight where the clarity can be sharpened, and show the easy wins that make this product land way faster. Let's dive in.
Hi, I'm Hugo. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Triggerfy. And we as a company are basically tracking social engagement across a few different channels, but primarily LinkedIn, to understand where sort of individual interests lie in from your buyers based on the content that they've engaged with. That's our MO, basically. After a few pivots, we've finally landed on something we like.
Tell me a little bit about how you came up with the idea for this app.
It was kind of a few different, it's been a few different iterations. So actually we started off as, me and my co-founder, as an agency. So we did that for like 6 months, kind of running like outbound for people, sort of data scraping and just kind of like doing cold email, that kind of thing. From there, we then moved into SaaS. So we kind of realized that we could take the learnings that we've done from that. We started off as like an AI SDR, so kind of trying to do, everything for everyone. That was problematic on multiple different levels. So we then decided to move into being more of a sort of classic signal platform. So tracking the likes of job data, new enroll, funding round announcements, that kind of thing. We then realized that actually that was fine and it was okay. You get some results out of it. But once we then released our sort of social data focused feature, we realized actually that this was where we wanted to move into, because ultimately people were really getting great results. They were loving it. They were loving the data. And so this is kind of how we've ended up in social. So I think a kind of classic startup story of kind of a few different pivots here and there to sort of really get where you want to be. And I think we're quite happy now being in social. So yeah.
Yeah. Big soft spot for founders to go from agency or consultant to building software. I can also definitely relate to that as well. A couple of questions that from just what you shared there. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you kind of had made some of those pivots to until you found something that is where you have product market fit. Can you walk through a little bit about how kind of the social signal data works and what about it is sort of?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's basically, from a social data perspective, I think the reason that it works really well is ultimately you are able to identify where, like, what an individual is interested in and use that to leverage a conversation to get that going and ultimately like tap into that interest within your messaging to then try to get them going.
A little bit more about kind of what the social signal data is actually, how you kind of landed in that niche.
Yeah.
What it's actually doing within your software.
Yeah. What we're actually doing is basically monitoring a few different channels, LinkedIn, Reddit, and YouTube, to identify either, like on LinkedIn, for example, who's been engaging with certain profiles, with certain content, and finding posts that are kind of relevant to your niche. And then we've got the similar thing going on in like Reddit with like subreddits, etc. So being able to kind of track conversations that are happening that you may want to be getting involved in on those platforms as well. So, and again, and also on YouTube, so being able to kind of find videos perhaps that you're mentioned in, find videos that there's comments in, etc. So kind of being able to track all of that. So that's really where we kind of see the value, and I think this really kind of our focus.
Got it. And remind me again, who is kind of your ideal customer? Is it generally one person within a team who's kind of making the decision and using the software? Is it a buying committee? And if so, who's kind of the champion?
It depends. We have a few different like areas, a few different customers. So typically if it's like a lead gen agency or a marketing agency, they're usually on the smaller side. So it'll usually be like we're speaking to the founder or, someone, there's usually kind of the headcount on those is usually between like sort of 1 to 10 kind of thing. So from an inbound perspective, like if we're speaking to them, we'll usually be getting the founder kind of talking to, because they have sort of ultimate control over the spend of the tools. And also it's very much dependent with agencies, also client by client. So again, like if they're working with a new client, they want to kind of like go out and scope out like what tools best match that person's need, because obviously because of what we do, like some industries are not on social at all, so obviously that we're not relevant to that. So it's usually, yeah, like if they're, like I said, it's usually the founder for lead gen agencies. If it's a bigger organization, it'll typically be like the growth individual. So people who are kind of, or like in sales, but perhaps they're like building sort of automations within the sales team. And they're typically, it's kind of head of growth or like head of sales, not so much, more like GTM engineers within businesses as well. Those kind of roles as well. So we're usually speaking to and selling to, because ultimately, like, they're the ones building the automations, making sure the data flows between us and their other tool sets and everything else. They're always usually the final say, basically, whether they think the data is A, useful, and B, can they integrate it with their current like ecosystem.
Makes a ton of sense. Can you maybe talk through a little bit about kind of what it sounds like you have kind of the in-house head of growth type of person, and you also have kind of the founder of a lead gen agency, both using it. Can you maybe talk through a little bit about what they were doing or what they would do if they weren't using your solution?
So, I mean, the data is acquirable through like other providers for sure, and we're not the first people to kind of think of this. But I think what we've kind of built and what we've kind of created for people is a safe environment to get the data. So a lot of these tools will require you to log into your own accounts. There's risk there associated with that, especially like on LinkedIn, for example, where they're really kind of clamping down on this type of behavior. So there's a level of risk there that you kind of want to avoid with your own accounts, because for some businesses, if the founder's profile goes down, that is complete disaster, right? So there's that element, which is the safety part of it, and then also just from our perspective, like we, especially with like the kind of other tools that we play with, we've built a very, like, in my opinion, a very slick system that allows you to ultimately like upload profiles, grab all that engagement, push that in an automated way into a Clay table, for example, that a lot of people use, and then that can be filtered in Clay and pushed out into an outbound tool, and that can be fully like 100% automated. Like, I spoke to an agency earlier, and they've just got 2 VAs in the Philippines like grabbing this data currently, and so that's very much like a that very manual process, and obviously expensive to hiring 2 people. So it's a case of just being able to really kind of grab the data and do it in a really slick way, basically in a safe way as well.
Yeah. So would you say kind of what I would call like your messaging wedge, or that thing that, someone's thinking, that the differentiator that someone's thinking about right before they actually sign up and become a customer would be being able to pull and automate social signaling data without risking any sort of brand or personal accounts?
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. With that in mind, do you want to go ahead and pull up your homepage and let's walk through it section by section?
Let's see how we get on.
So the first thing I'm immediately seeing is you have a really clean, minimalist design. Makes a lot of sense. You kind of see all the normal things: content help, which I'm assuming is your resources section, pricing, login, book a demo, start a free trial. Oh, that's actually interesting. So I see 2 different CTAs, one in your navigation menu and then one in your hero section. They're completely different. So it sounds like you probably maybe have a sales led motion, and then you also have the ability to just do straight up product led. Can you maybe walk me through a little bit about how many of you, like what kind of the split is between who's booking a demo versus who's just starting a free trial and converting that direction?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the book a demo, really, like, we have a sort of an enterprise package where typically we want that to kind of come through us, just because for a few different reasons. Like, we want to establish a relationship with them and obviously like nurture them as a customer. That would be typically kind of on the bigger end. We actually, so it's a fair point, because we've actually just switched from being kind of sales led to just opening up and being PLG, and kind of allowing people to kind of come on as a free trial. So it's a fair point, actually. With the 2 CTAs, maybe we don't need that initially. Could be a bit confusing. I don't know. Is it bad to have 2 CTAs, do you think? Or
it's not bad if, for example, for a fact that it's 50-50 between who's booking a demo versus who's signing up for free, versus if you happen to know for a chance that 80% of people are just starting for a free trial and converting that direction, and maybe a couple of those folks you reach out to because they look like they might be good enterprise candidates, then in that case, yeah, it would be kind of probably hurting conversions in a pretty big way. It sounds like because you are more product led, I would maybe say lean only to start a free trial. Put that also within the main navigation menu. Or if the data is telling you opposite side, and that you have enough enterprise demand that you want to have that book a demo built in, you can have 2 CTAs. I would just kind of change up the CTA and have one of them be kind of that pink on white main primary one, and then another one right next to it within the hero section that says like book a demo, you'll often see it as kind of like, just a normal like kind of white button with black text or something like that. So you kind of see that there. But in this case, I would probably just lean all in and have start a free trial, have both of those be in the same sort of place, both same copy. And that's again, like that micro copy, having it be the same does make a difference. It sounds small, but in my own experience across all of these jams, and then also through work I do with clients, like that sort of having different copy there can actually create some like micro friction.
Okay, nice, fair point. Anything else on here that looks troublesome?
A couple of the things that you are coming to mind. So your H1 right now is signal for social listening for modern B2B teams. That makes sense. However, I know you mentioned just earlier on in this podcast recording that you kind of have two different audiences. You have lead gen agencies, and then you also have kind of head of growth startups, which in this case, this would definitely speak to the modern B2B teams. But I think you could maybe make it even clearer, like what your wedge is, which is, hey, kind of signal force data that isn't going to get your accounts put at risk. Finding a way to kind of eloquently say that's kind of your wedge and what makes you different from some of your competitors or just the manual solutions, like the person who is, the VA who's literally scraping this every single day for you. I would kind of spell that out within that H1 and within kind of what you're saying right below, where you say scan social media to unlock the hidden social signals your prospects are making. Can you get even more clear, more specific there about what kind of makes you different and what your wedge is?
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Fine.
Anything that kind of stands out from that?
I think the safety element probably is quite a big thing that we need to lean on a bit more. That is like a big sort of differentiator. And I think if we can kind of really make that clear, that could be quite useful, I think, for people.
You can even kind of hit it again with kind of where you say millions of data points. Can you be even more specific there? And also to say like X number of data points with, out sacrificing brand safety, something like that to just kind of further hint at it is a way to go about it.
Makes sense.
And then also really like that just right on your hero section, you already have trusted by 1,000 plus data go-to-market teams. Makes a ton of sense. You have the social proof, something you see on pretty much every homepage. It makes and that actually does work. So now we're kind of getting into, I'm assuming, kind of screenshots of your tool.
Correct. Yeah. So it's basically, we are going to be losing the astronauts, just as an FYI. But essentially, yes. So this is basically be able to kind of starting to kind of show people what it would look like kind of within the tool and kind of the sort of things they would be getting from the tool, basically the outcomes from the tool.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. What is making you kind of lose the astronaut?
If you want to know the real story, it's quite a funny story. One of our investors called us a moonshot, and as a result, we were like, well, we're just going to put astronauts on here because you called us a moonshot. And so it wasn't really like a thought out branding choice. So it kind of doesn't really fit with anything. Like we haven't really kind of built the brand around it or anything. So we're actually we're going to scrap it and kind of do a bit of a sort of refurb of the brand.
Yeah, makes sense. Scroll down. So now you kind of see a little bit about what you do, profile engagement, account signals, keyword engagement. I really like this section. I also really like what you had before where you're kind of showcasing the signals. What I would maybe say you might want to have right before the section and then right after those where you're kind of showing product screenshots is like a very quick section that just kind of spells out a little bit more about the problem. So you're kind of utilizing your homepage and what I'd consider kind of your wedge to wow moments, which I kind of use within these credit exams. And then also when I'm writing copy as well, is like you want to have it be a narrative. So it makes a lot of sense. So if someone is skimming the page, they can immediately see, okay, your wedge moment, and they'll know within 3 seconds whether this might be for them or not. And then you have section right below where it's like, just solve the problem. So like you've already kind of mentioned, one of the problems was people using, VAs to like literally take this data by hand or, getting their accounts at risk. Can you just eloquently add on to that narrative in a couple of lines right before the section to just further be able to signal, hey, this is why it's working and stuff like that.
Makes sense.
And then you had kind of go into right here what you do. No comments there. This all makes a ton of sense.
All look good.
I'm spelling that very clearly. I actually do think the astronaut branding, whether you get rid of it or not, you either get rid of it entirely or lean into it even more. There is definitely something to be said. I actually did a jam really recently with someone else who was also kind of thinking about whether or not to keep their mascot. And in their case, they were so into it where like it was in all of their swag. in all of their trade show booths. So in that post, I'm like, yeah, lean into this. This makes you different. If you're not, or you can do the opposite, which it sounds like in your case, it might be the opposite, where it was just kind of an afterthought that has been on the homepage and it hasn't been fully integrated in your brand. But mascots can, particularly in B2B, be an interesting way to set yourself apart, add personality, and get a lot more traction through word of mouth faster.
Yeah, nice. I think what you said there was a bit of an afterthought, and I don't think we've kind of like really like utilized it enough to really kind of make it, to sort of have it around kind of thing. I think we'll go back to something like this, but it just needs to be a bit more thought out.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Scroll to the next section. So the next thing I see is social proof. I love it. It's super clear exactly who this is. You can kind of see that the tools that the people that you have definitely seem to map to your ICP, kind of lead gen agencies as well as kind of head of growth. What you might even want to specify even more, now that I'm kind of thinking about this within your, going back to the hero section where you're kind of specifying on your wedge, is maybe after this making it really clear it's for both agencies as well as kind of modern B2B startups, just so that they both kind of see that path.
Interesting. So you would have somehow label what these people do, or like split the testimonials out to be sort of industry specific?
You can definitely, I would definitely say like have like a call out directly in your hero section that says, hey, this is for modern B2B teams as well as agencies. And then what some people actually end up doing is adding like a very small little section as well, where it's like, hey, use cases, and you can kind of spell out the different ways that an agency would use it versus how it had a growth at an in-house startup might.
Okay, makes sense.
But the actual testimonials, I wouldn't change any of this at all. Makes a ton of sense. You're doing a lot of things really, really right there. You have the logos right within your hero section so people can see it immediately. And then you just scroll down a little bit more right after, what you do, and you can kind of see that social proof, and it just further reinforces your credibility.
Nice. Okay, cool. We're getting a few things right here, which is quite nice.
Yes. So who uses social data? Oh, actually, this would actually be the right place to go ahead and mention what we just talked about, agencies as well as kind of head of growth, spelled out in this section right here.
Yeah.
That is what I would do.
To be fair, we've got a few different sections here, which is growth, marketing, and then enterprise and API as well. Yeah. We could add, I think. Sorry, go on.
Go on.
I was just saying we could probably lean more into the sort of GTM kind of role, I guess. Would probably be another sort of like focus point for us. But yeah,
I would maybe even say within kind of all of these, can you get even a little bit more specific? So instead of calling it growth, marketing, API, and GTM, can you get more specific into the actual thing each one of those use cases would actually care about? Because that clarity and that specificity is what's going to convert more people, not only on your homepage, but through all of your marketing.
Makes sense.
But I do like the screenshots and how it's laid out. Scroll down. Cool. So now you're kind of getting into more use cases. I like it. Targeted advertising, influencer marketing, evergreen campaigns, customer success. So you're now just kind of, now more people who are on this, who are your ICP, are going to immediately see, okay, this is for me or not. Oh, and now I actually have even more ideas for how I could use it, and how that actually maps really well to kind of those wow moments where you're kind of thinking about, oh, I didn't even realize I could use this for influencer marketing. And suddenly they're here for one thing, and now they're like, oh, they're already thinking about 5 other things, which is not going to only help you with conversions, but it's also going to keep your tool a lot stickier.
Yeah, makes sense.
For retention, scroll down. So built for your tech stack, you have logos, no notes.
So this is basically just showing like all the sort of integrations that we have and kind of where we can kind of sit with everything.
I like it. Turn interest into intent. Okay, more social proof, it sounds like. Can you get a little bit more clear? And maybe this is just the cynic in me when I kind of see percentage signs. Can you get a little bit more clear on exactly what 25% public response rate looks like, 2.5x, and 40%? Like, is there even just a more specific number, or just a little bit more of a specific use case that you can signal into that?
Yeah, I think there could be, for sure. I think it would be like, I'd maybe even want to show like an example of how maybe it could be like 25% positive response rate, and then the flow or the setup that got them there, if that makes sense, and kind of how we're part of that. Because I think that's a big thing that people ask us. It's like, our tool is typically like one piece of a bigger cog, and so it's like, how does that kind of fit in with all of that? And I think if you could show a bit more, just kind of show a bit more, like thinking about it now, like show a bit more like as part of it, as part of a flow or something like that. That could be good.
Yeah, that would be a really good addition to make on this page. And then scroll down. Cool. Now you have your final CTA ready to transform your prospecting, start a free trial. Makes a lot of sense. Same CTA across. One thing you might want to do is like you have the final CTA, which is great. And then you also have questions. We're here to help. Book a demo. That's a little bit jarring to have both of them in the same line. Can you maybe just get rid of the one on the right where it says have questions, where it's just a little bit more vague?
Sure. Because actually that would probably be, thinking about that now, that should probably connect to customer support, really, not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, or sort of open up. I mean, I can't believe that, but we've got a thing down here, but maybe that connects. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, and then I would also even to say within your kind of live chat / AI chatbot feature, can you even get a little more, if it seems like it's actually pulling from some of your own data, some of the own things within, kind of dogfooding your own software within it, if I'm kind of getting it right, can you actually be a little bit clearer about that? Because that actually could just be a really interesting way to kind of add into showing your wedge and wow moments directly, because, hey, we're not only doing this, we're not only doing this for customers, we're actually doing this on our own for ourselves as well. That's just like a really strong, easy branding move.
Nice.
Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think that was it. I think it was good. I mean, we tried to keep the website quite simple and clean as best we could. I think that we were initially kind of we were talking about doing some very sort of lavish designs, shall we say. But without, you got to spend quite a lot of money to really get it. If you half-ass that, then it just looks really bad. So we've kept it quite clean and simple, which maybe is a little bit boring, but I think it's good that you didn't think it was that badly structured, which is quite nice. We talked a lot about, so that's actually quite great. Yeah.
If anything, there's definitely one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make is spending like a huge amount of money on the design and then spending 3 seconds on the copy, and oftentimes like the bigger thing is really think through your positioning and your messaging and like what is that individual wedge, which it sounds like you're really clear on that now. And making sure that it's front and center, and then what are those kind of wow moments that are just going to kind of over deliver and not only for conversions today, but also increase retention and ARPU along the lines.
Yeah, great. That was good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on to Clarity Jams.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.